Begin the current Daf Mesech this Kidushin Daf Ayin Dalad. Begin on the bottom of Ayin Gimel Beis, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid, where the Gemara continues in a related discussion with the previous Daf. Rashi tells us it's the Seifa of the Brisa we mentioned before regarding the Nemanis. We had mentioned that there are 3 that are believed to say immediately, and we had said one of them was a Chaya, meaning a midwife. The Gemara brought a brisa that the midwife is believed to say, this one's a kohen, this one's a Levi, this one's a Nasan, this one's a Mamzer. The brisa says, when did we say that? If there was no Ir, but there was Ir, it should not believed. And that's what the Gemara continues now, according to brisa, regarding other people that they're also believe, but it's also, there are certain requirements when we believe them, when we don't, just like we said regarding the midwife, that it's only as long as she's still in the room or she didn't turn her face away. Same thing applies to these other individuals. Just corresponds to Kazakh. And the Chesed turned to Daf Chaim, should turn to today's Daf, B'schos v'chein b'nei Yisrael, and Yisrael throughout the world. So I'm discussing today's Daf are Shleisha Nemanim al Bukhar. There are 3 individuals that I believe regarding the firstborn to say that he's the firstborn. That's a Chaya. Again, that means a midwife. Aviv, his father, Ima, and his mother. But there can be different amounts of times how long we believe them. Abishal, we said in the Mishnah, he called the Shtuki B'duki. He called the Shtuki, which we said Shtuki is the one that we silence him when he says Tati because we don't know who his father is. He calls him not Shtuki but Baduki. Why Baduki? Shabayt Kedusima, because they inspect the mother by Meres. Like Kashan Balti, she says the Bia was to a Kasha person. Nemenish, and then actually she's believed he's not going to consider the Shtuki as a Safik Mamzer way Tanakama held. He considers him as a Baduki. Then the Gemara continues with the halacha of the Mishnah Kal Asur Navi B'Kal Mutarim Lavazebezeh. Whoever is forbidden to enter into the Kehila, then they're permitted to intermarry. Which the Gemara has a few different options about what that actually translates as. Is that talking about ger noisim mamzeres? Because a ger is not kahal, they're permitted to marry mamzeres, or is it related to mamzer ma'achais and mamzer me'eshes ish, regarding them intermarrying? Because actually, if you have a relationship with a sister versus a married woman, one is going to be chiva mises best, and one's going to be chiva krisis, and then the question is, are they permitted to intermarry? And or ger amoni miavi, regarding, do we say it applies to them that they're forbidden lavi b'kol? That's regarding them that we're discussing. It's regarding specifically those type of ger. To begin the current Daf Ayin Gimel Beis, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid. The end of the brisa we had mentioned before that we spoke about that there are certain individuals that we believe regarding certain situations unrelated to themselves, like the midwife. So on that, the brisa brings, if you have 2 people that are fighting over a purchased item, one person says, "You sold it to me." The other guy says, "No, to me you sold it, and it's my object," which Gemara later on is going to explain. It's talking about where both of them paid money. Each one gave the full price, but one gave it consent, and one gave it against the will of the seller. But each one's claiming he's the one that paid for it rightfully. And that says the Brisa, the owner, the object, the seller is believed to say, this the guy sold it to. This guy didn't sell it to. He threw the money at me, but he should take back his money because him I didn't sell it to. Says the Brisa B'Medber, when we say this, when the item is still in the hand of the seller. Why is that important? Because then it's imposed upon him to be diligent, not to back out of the one that he really did sell it to, and to give him back the money and give the item to the one that it was not really sold it to, because if he does that, then he violates what's called mishapara. Mishapara is a bridge of a full sentence that Hashem is going to punish those who back out of stuff that they had promised to sell. And here, if you really sold it to this guy and you're backing out, you're going to get punished for that. So therefore, he's very careful to make sure that he knows who the guy is, because he has to make sure he follows through. That's when we believe the seller who was that really bought it. But if let's say the item is not in the hand of the seller anymore, you have both buyers grabbing hold of it, saying it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, outside in the parking lot with the wagon, then we don't believe the seller because it's not imposed upon him anymore. So he's not careful to remember, to recall who it is. So even though in the moment before he does, he's like, okay, he remembers what he did. Once it's done, on to the next customer, he's not believed anymore to say who it was that bought it. It says the Gemara Ayin Dalman Aleph, because as Rashi explains, the Gemara's question is, the Gemara assumes that obviously if he's saying he sold it to this guy and he didn't sell it to that guy, that he only got the money from one of them. So that for sure he's going to remember who he got money from. So let's just see who he took the money from. He took the money from both of them. He said, but one I gave willingly, one threw the money, forced me to take the money. And it's not known to us, which one was with his consent, which one was without his consent. So saying up until he gives the item, then he's going to be recalling, but after that, he's not going to remember, okay, which one was the guy, who was the difficult one, that he's not going to know, and then he's not going to be believed. Another similar case, says the Braisam, is Nemadayin Loimer, a judge is believed to say, this guy I vindicated, and this guy I held liable. Now, again, when we say this, if the litigants are standing in front of him, so it's incumbent upon the judge to recall, because they didn't leave yet from when they finished their court case, to say who's Chayiv and who's Zakai. But if the litigants are not standing in front of him anymore, so it's not his responsibility to remember every single court case that comes to him. Saying he's not believed anymore to say who's the guy who won the case and who's the guy who lost the case. Says the Gemara, let's see who's holding the psak din of the vindication of the court case. No, it's not necessary. The kriya is a chasayu. That it was torn up their rights. Maybe a time in history when they couldn't have these types of documents. Believe it as it may, that's not a raya anymore. But then the Gemara says, why do you need this whole thing to say that he's not believed anymore once they're not in front of him? Who cares to believe him? I have a better option. Go back and him or some other judge, judge him again. Do it over again according to their claims. What do you lose to say we believe, we don't believe? Okay, you guys are disagreeing. We'll do the court case over. Now we'll remember. And we'll come out with the same result. Says the Gemara, no. Rashi and Taisus, but Beshuda the Daini. Rashi explains we're talking about a court case that the judgment was not dependent on rationale. Rather, it was just dependent on the choice of the judge. As the Gemara brings Ksubas that payment bays. Some guy passed away and he said that mine the Chasim they go to Tuvia. Then two Tuvias come along. And both are relatives or both are neighbors. So what's the halacha? So on that the halacha was said Shuda Didaina, which whatever that means, that like the throwing of the judge, but whoever the heart of the judge appears to say, it seems to me that this Tuvia was better friends with him. He was more, spent more time with him. So you give it to that one. So once the psak was like that, if he's going to come to back out, he cannot back out. And therefore you can't go back and judge over again, because maybe the second time, the second judge or whatever it is, he'll feel better towards the other guy. If it was something based on halacha, clear cut, so fine, do it over again. But here, since it's for the daina, therefore we don't know. It might turn up the other way. We can't force that guy to do the case over again. Now, similarly, the Gemara brings someone of Nachman. There's three individuals that are trusted regarding the status of a firstborn. They are Chaya, the midwife, Aviv, the father, Bimai, and his mother. Now, the Gemara explains that each three of them have different time spans for when they're believed regarding, as we said, regarding the midwife in the previous daf, how long they're believed. Chaya la'alter. So the midwife, like we said in the previous daf, is only immediately, once she leaves the room, and some say even if she just turns her face around, she's not believed anymore to say who is who. But right away, she's believed to say this is the firstborn. Imai kol shiva. The mother, all the first 7 days. Why? Because the father doesn't yet recognize the firstborn son, because the words, the way Rashi says, he hasn't yet left the hands of the mother to go to the bris, which is on Bite, Bisman and Morgan, bringing the zin to the bris, because the first week is with the mother. From that point onwards, it's imposed upon the father to recognize him, like the pasuk says, as the Gemara continues the next thing, Aviv la'olam. The fathers believe forever to say that this is the firstborn. Ketan like Linda Braisim. It's a pasuk that says that this in Devarim Chafalev, because the firstborn, the son of the hated one, it says Yaakov, he should recognize to give him a double portion in whatever it is that he has. Now, what does it mean, Yaakov? Yaakov and the Lacherim will make him recognizable to others. That this is my firstborn, my bechar, and that the Torah says is always believed. The mother for the first week and the midwife right away. Now, says Rabbi Yehuda, he says, I want to tell you there's an added chiddush over here. Just like a person believed to say that this is my firstborn, my son. So too the fathers believed to say that this is the son of a divorcee and this is the son of the chalutza that I married. Which Chaser says, the Masechet Kidushin says, I understand. Where did you get this from? That a person believed to say, this is my son from the Gerusha that I was not allowed to marry. I could understand to say, this is my firstborn, the Bechar. That makes sense that he would believe because that's good for the child. That way, like the Pasuk says, he'll take a double portion, but to invalidate him, why should you believe the father? And that's the what you could say is that this that he's believed to say, this is my firstborn son, is talking about that we're talking about an infant with older siblings. That he's saying that baby, that of his sons, is the Bechar. And even so, he's believed, even though by testifying that this one's Bechar. He's obviously making a chazaka that the older children were mamzerim, and therefore they're not his firstborn. So that's where you see that the same thing is, a person is believed to say, Zeb ben Gerusha ben Chalutza, because you see from the pasuk inherent that if you're believing that this baby is the Bechar, then what are you saying about the other children? We're believing you that they're psulim. So you see that a person believed to say,
he's a time.
Yeah. So Taisa brings from Ben Elio a different pshat, that because the pasuk says ki is b'chor ben hasnua yaker, and what does it mean ben hasnua? We said on Daf Samaches snu ben nisu eha. In other words, that's a negative prohibition, and that yaker is going on both yaker that is b'chor and yaker that is ben gerush ben chalutza, which is snu ben nisu eha. That's he said I found it in Yishalmi like that. So that's what you see from the pasuk itself. It's telling you that the yaker is going also on not only on the benefit of the b'chor, but also the psul of like let's say ben gerush ben chalutza. But the they disagree. They said no in eman. They disagree like Rashi says just on ben gerush ben chalutza. For that a father is not believed. He's only believed yaker to say that is the firstborn son. Now we said in the Mishnah, Abishol heikoyel shtuki beduki. Although the Tanna Kama calls him shtuki, which is like we said that we silence him when he says tati because we don't know who your father is, so therefore you're suffering mamzer. But Abishol called him beduki. He says my beduki. If you say that it means from the word shaboidkines imoy, they inspect the mother, that they check her out and they ask her all these questions. Vos heis, what's this going on that you're pregnant? Then she says lekosher nevalti, that it says I had beer with a kosher person, meaning she was single, but there was no the person was not a psul, was not a nasim, was not a mamzer. And Nemena, she's believed, that's what we're calling a beduki, that we check the mother, meaning, not like Tanakh was saying mamzer. If we're going to believe the mother, says, wait, come on, who's that like? That's Kedam and Gamliel. That, and the Gemara says, why would Rebbe have to teach our Mishnah for this machlokes in two different places? Why don't we just teach the teaching of Abba Shal over there, which, as the Gemara is going to quote right now, elsewhere, that it should have just said, and also Abba Shal says like him also. Because as the Gemara says, Tanin the Chazazim already learned the opinion of Gamliel with his machlokes somewhere else. It's not like we're in the Mishnah Masechet Ksubis. Mishnah says, if a woman was pregnant, tell her, what's going on here? What's this fetus that you got over here? He says, so that man, and he's a kain, in other words, not really din kain, meaning he's a meyuchas. He's someone that's a kosher person. So we have machlokes. And they say that she's believed. Meaning, we believe and we consider the child not a mom, so we consider the child as a kosher child. Rabbi Shloimy says, we don't believe based on her mouth. We don't know. It might be a mamzer. We're not going to believe her. He says, so the question is, if that's exactly what Abba Shol in our mission is saying regarding that we call it that a beduki because we check the mother, and that is if she says that it was a kosher, we believe her. So why are we saying it over here in Kidushin Daf Ayin? Why don't you say it over there in Masechet Ksubis? Says the Gemara, no, you need it. Because Chada, the teaching of Gamliel over there in Masechet Ksubis was a hachsheba. He was only talking about believing her to validate herself. That she does not become halala from truma, because if we only know she had bia because we see her pregnant, we say, hey, what's going on with the fetus? But we don't really mean around the fetus. What's up with you? If you had bia with some snarky guy, who knows what's going on? Some psul, some guy is thrown out of the community. So then you become a psul. You become halal. You can have truma. But the question over there was not regarding the fetus. If it's a daughter, that no, she's not necessarily believed. She can't marry a kohen. Oh, so Gamliel was only telling us that you validated her. But one Abba Shal's teaching was Aksha Bebita, He's coming about even the daughter, the fetus itself, because the Mishnah was saying that going on the child that the Tanakh comes as a shtuki, he's saying beduki.
She was an Ashes Kohen.
Who?
The lady.
No, she was a single girl. That's it.
Talking about her. Not a problem.
No, she'll become a halal. If a woman has a biyah from a apostle, let's say a nos and a mamzer, she becomes a chalim and akuna. No, she can't have truma, she basko and whatever this and that. But so Gamliel was only talking about regarding her. Rabbi Shloimy was saying even more than that. He was regarding the daughter itself. So he must say, wait a second, that answer is only a halfway good answer. That goes according to one who says base that even the one who says that we're saying that the woman is kosher, that doesn't validate the daughter. There is an opinion mentioned over the Ksubas that the one who says that she is kosher means to say that by default her child's also kosher because he's believed to say that some kosher. So then Abishal, Maya slash Min, what's Abishal now Mishnah to teach us? Again, we're back to the question, why don't you say Abishal there in Ksubas? Says Gemara, no, Abishal are different from Abishal still is a little bit better, and it was necessary to teach his teaching later on in Kidushin more than what we said in Masechet Ksubas. Why? If all we had was from Lili and Ksubas, I would have said over there did of Kshein Etzla. I would have said the case talking about a single girl, and most of the people in town are kosher people, meyuchas that can marry to kahuna. So that's what we're going to say that okay, we'll believe her. But where most are possible. For example, let's say she's engaged and she says that the bee was from the chassan, or she's single, but most people in town are possible over there. She lives amongst in Elam, only people with mamzerim. I would say we don't believe her. Tzricha, that's what's necessary to say that we're going to believe her, and the child, the daughter, is going to be able to be someone that can marry to kahuna. And then Rabbi concludes, like Abishal, that the mother is believed to say that who is this child from, and therefore he calls the shtuki a beduki because he disagrees with Tanakhama, does not consider the child a suffix mamzer, he considers the child as a kosher because the mother is believed. And Ramul already said that. Either Ramul was only talking about the mother, not the baby, and or the second pshat is even talking about the baby, but maybe he's talking about Rav Ksher in this line, Abishal would even be talking about Rav Psul Metzlam. So it depends. Rashi had two different pshatim, but not married. Not married. But married, which she would say it's from her husband. Whatever. So that's So that's talking about a single girl. Whatever. Someone that we're asking her, hey, how are you pregnant exactly? So and then she says, oh, it's from a kasha. Married woman. We said previously should just say it's from her husband. She wouldn't have these problems about like who's this fetus from. But here was a single girl saying, so what happened to you? What happened to you? So that's the saying. That's the question that's about her. It's about the child. Abishal is saying what we believe the mother to say who the child is from. Now we continue with the same theme of the previous Mishnah regarding, as we're talking about in this parak, regarding Asar Yuchas, and we're talking about the Yichus, about who's allowed to marry into the Kehillah. So it says the Mishnah, Kol Asugim Lo B'Kol. We already said this actually before. Whoever is forbidden to marry into the Kehillah, so they're all in the same category. They're the outcasts. They're allowed to marry each other. So, for example, a mamzer can marry a shtuki. Now, that's a chiddush, because even though the mamzer is definite mamzer and the shtuki is suffix mamzer, and you could say that maybe the shtuki is really kosher because you just don't know who the father is. It might have been a regular guy. Even so, it's permitted, like we already learned in Daf Yomi and Aleph, because it's only a problem. But kal vade lo yava, but kal suffix could be yava. And the Gemara is going to ask. We already said this in the ratio. We already said this in the previous Mishnah, the same exact halacha. Why repeating it over here? But says the Mishnah further. Actually, Rabbi Yehuda Eiser. The Gemara is going to explain why would he say it's usher? Why can they not intermarry one with the other? Now, a third opinion, Rebbe Eliezer Eimer, he says that, or it's Rebbe Lazar, that he says vadoin bevadoin mutter. When it's a definite amongst the definite permitted. So a mamzer and a nasan from the nesinim, from the gevonim, which are definitely psulei kal, so they're allowed to marry each other. But vadoin besveikon. So let's say a mamzer and a nesini who are vadai in a suffix, let's say to marry a shtuk and a sufi, or the other way around. Same thing, just different way around. A shtuk and a sufi regarding marrying a mamzer and a nesini. Or sveikim besveikan. One shtuki with another shtukis, or a sufi with another sufis, or a sufi with a shtukis, which those are all sveikas. We don't know exactly who the father was or who the mother and the father was. Aser, they're forbidden to intermarry because maybe the suffix is kosher, and the vada is possible. Or maybe this suffix is kosher and this suffix is possible. We don't know. Therefore, that's forbidden of that isser. Now, says the Mishnah Beilein Hasfekas, what are the cases of the Sveikis. What's doubtful situations? You have Shtuki, which we said we don't know who the father is. Assume we don't know who the father and the mother is. The Kuti. The Gemara explain what's the suffix regarding the Kuthins. The Kuthins were those that Sancherim settled in the cities of Shomron, as the Pasuk says in Malachim Beis, that the king of Ashur came and he brought from Kut. He brought, because they came from Kusa, they were called Kusim. But they brought them in to take the place of the 10 tribes that were exiled, and they converted to Judaism because they were afraid of the lions that were attacking them, as the pasuk says. Hashem sent these lions, and the whole topic there is talked about in Sefer Malachim, but they're also considered as a suffix, and the Gemara is going to explain what exactly is the suffix of these kuthins. Now the Gemara first explains the opening halach of the Mishnah. My kol asur and lav b'kol. What is it that you're saying that whoever is forbidden to marry into the kehillah, they're permitted to marry themselves? Elam, if you think it means to say, as we've said all along in this sugi, mamzeri, menesini, shtuki, basufi, those are all individuals that cannot marry into the kehillah. Says Gemara Hatanli Reisha. The previous Mishnah, the Reisha already said this halacha. We said mamzeri, menesini, shtuki, basufi, mutar lo bezeh. They're not intimate. Why would we be repeating the same exact line in the next Mishnah? But moreover, what's difficult is the next time in our Mishnah said, B'doisi says it's forbidden. Says the Gemara, what's this going on? If he's specifically mentioning regarding from the Asur and Lav B'Kol, some are Vadai Asur, some are Safik Asur, and that's what he's saying, that the Vadai would not be able to marry the Safik, but you can't say that. How many times they say? But look, the third opinion mentioned in the Mishnah. Third opinion mentioned was Rabbi Lazar. He says, Adam b'Adam mutter. A definite, let's say a mamzer or a nasan, that's going to be mutter for them to marry. Adam b'Sveikan, b'Sveikan, he said that's going to be Asur. So Machlad Rabbi Yehuda, who's the second opinion of the Mishnah, obviously does not hold like Rabbi Lazar, because then they would be the same opinion. So obviously that's not the point that he's making. So what would he be saying? That Asur, how could you say a mamzer and a nasa cannot marry each other? They're both the same category of psulei kol. V'chitim, if you're going to say this following option, which almost doesn't make sense, but Rashi is going to explain in a second. Rabbi Yehuda Eiser, what is Rabbi Yehuda Eiser going on? A ger b'mamzeres. He doesn't let a ger marry a mamzeres. What shaykh is, like Rashi explains, because the Gemara in Daf Ayin Beis and Beis brought a brayso. Yehuda says a ger, he holds, is considered kahal. So a ger cannot marry a mamzeres. So as Rashi tells us, we don't find really regarding the halachas of Yuchasin, which our parak is discussing, that Yehuda disagrees regarding any other halacha. So maybe you're going to say, when Yehuda says asur, what's he saying is asur? Asur for a ger to marry a mamzeres. Says the Gemara, Midigei b'mamzeres ketani. Did we mention anything about a ger marrying a mamzeres? If you're just coming to disagree and say, I hold that they're asur, we didn't mention that. We were talking about where it's forbidden to enter into the kila, and the ger is not from those. A ger is allowed to marry into the kila. So what is Rabbi Yehuda saying asur? It doesn't make sense based on the interpretation that kol asur and lo b'kol means the classic mamzer, nasini, and shtuki, and asufi. We wouldn't understand what is Rabbi Yehuda saying. So Rabbi Yehuda says, as he continues with base, he says, no, a novel interpretation. Truth is, yes, Rabbi Yehuda is going, because that's really the only thing we find him talking about in our halachas of Yochasin, of ger related to mamzeres. Where is he coming from? Because when he heard the Tana Kama in our Mishnah talking about that it's actually permitted for a ger to marry a mamzeres. Where did the Tana Kama say that? Because read the words differently. When the Tana Kama said that whoever is forbidden to enter the kehillah is allowed to marry each other, he didn't mean the classic kahal of the entire Jewish people. He meant in the kahal of the kahuna. That's what we're talking about. That kehillah, whoever cannot marry, it is a little bit of a more finer point daf to hold cup. That whoever is forbidden to marry into the kehillah of kahuna, they could marry each other. Maininu. So what is that talking about? Says the Gemara, that's a giyoris, that's a female convert. A girl, a whole family was converted. She was 2 years old, under 3 years old in one day. A kohen generally is forbidden to marry a giyoris. Now, it's even less than 3 years old. That's not fit for bia, because generally the concern is we're concerned for znus. Any girl that's not Jewish, we're concerned for znus. But even under 3, the kohen is forbidden because the pasuk says in Yechezkel, ki im besulis mizer beis Yisrael, that the kohen should only be marrying virgins from the Jewish seed. So even a girl that was 2 years old converted is not mizera beis Yisrael. So what the Tanakhama was saying is that this 2-year-old girl that converted to Judaism, that's a case that we're talking about, that the Tanakhama said that is allowed to, that gayer is allowed to marry a mamzeres, and as we explain in a second, and it's regarding that we're saying is cannot enter the kahi, since a gayer is pachus cannot marry the kahuna, so it's considered psule kahuna. Those psule kahuna are allowed to marry each other, which included mamzerim. Mamzerim, all the they obviously cannot marry, they can't even the Yisrael. They're allowed to marry each other. It's regarding that they were talking about, as the Gemara explains, with the like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg.
How could she do it too?
Right, so that's the sugya of ger cotton, that the father does it with the family, and it's or the bezin could do it in certain situations, and then we ask them when they're turning bar mitzvah if they want to maintain that. So he's saying that with Tanakhama says that a ger is allowed to marry a mamzeres. So that would be because the ger cannot marry, the kohen cannot marry the geyeres. So Yehuda would hold that. Yehuda, so that we'll see in a second exactly how Yehuda holds. That's the Gemara. That's going to be the Gemara's discussion. That's exactly what the Gemara is about to discuss. So first the Gemara says the Kidushin ben Yochi. Now the Kidushin ben Yochi. What is that? He says later on Daf Ayin Chesed Aleph. He says not true. A geyeres younger than 3 years old is kosher for kahuna. So that's exactly the machlekes. When the Tanakhama said kala sachan love b'kal, we didn't mean what we said in the previous Mishnah, forbidden to the kila of the Jewish people. It meant b'kal of kahuna. What is it that's being included in that klal more than what we said about that can't come into the kal of klal Yisrael? What would be included more than that is a geyeres that's younger than 3 years old, and for sure if she's older than 3 years old, that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochi holds mutarin, that those that are forbidden, meaning the geyeres, the mamzerim, the nesini, and the shtuki, who are not allowed to marry kahuna, even a girl less than 3 years old, are permitted lavoi zebazeh, are permitted to marry each other. And on that is what Yehuda says that no, not true. You cannot go ahead and marry this mamzer, which is because he holds that it's kosher for kahuna. So essentially, the barometer is if you're pasal love it kahuna. What case is that talking about that we're coming to include? Is a geyeres less than 3 years old? So then you're gonna if you hold it's pasal for kahuna, so then they're allowed to intermarry with mamzerim. But if you hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochi, that if you hold that less than 3 is kosher for kahuna, then you're pasal. So the Gemara wants to know why are we giving such a complex case of less than 3 years old and saying it's not like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochi, who says that a geyeres less than 3 years old is kosher for kahuna, and we're saying like the Tanakhama that it's pasal for kahuna, and that's why gerim can marry mamzerim, versus Rabbi Yehuda holds that gerim cannot marry mamzerim. Why are we saying it like that? Why don't we say it's talking about that the girl is 3 years old, not less? And maybe say less than 3 years old permitted for kohen. We're not talking about that. And therefore, for Shimon ben Yochi, you could say same thing like Shimon ben Yochi. Shimon ben Yochi only disagrees. Younger than 3, older than 3, everyone agrees is us because she's mezana, we presume, and therefore it's forbidden to kahuna. Why do we have to say this? That it's not that we're talking about less than 3, and it's not going to be like Shimon ben Yochi. Says Gemara, no. Imkain, if that would be the case, that you would explain the halacha of our Mishnah, the Tanakhama like Rabbi Shimon, that less than 3 she's permitted to kahuna, and he only permitted that the Tanakama to have marrying a mamzeres only those that are forbidden to kuhuna, it would sound like that the girl less than 3, that giyaris, would be forbidden to mamzer. That would obviously be the inference. So the question is, mitzida tavra, but you have a response, a difficulty, prepared right away then, because then you would have the following difficulty. It would sound like, Ella, taima the bashol shon b'yamechad. Okay, so what do you tell me? That because the girl is over 3 years old, so she's psula kahuna because we consider her a zayna. So therefore, she's allowed to marry, for she's psula kalab kahuna. So she's allowed to marry the mamzer, or the mamzeres, whichever one it is, because she's psula kahuna. Okay, but what would you tell me then? If she's under the age of 3, then okay, then she's not a zayna yet. Then she's permitted to marry into the gilab kuna. Then you tell me what would happen then? Really? That then she would be forbidden to marry a mamzer, and the mamzer would be forbidden to marry her? Right? That would obviously be the inference. Problem is, hooray, but a giyaris, that pchusim b'ashal shom echad, that's less than 3, she is permitted, like we said, under 3 to marry kuhuna, but a mutaris lavai zebozeh, meaning, as Rashi explains, because since the Kal of Gerim is not Kahal, Vaharaya, you tell me when she's over 3 that she's allowed to marry Mamzerim because she's in the category of Psuli Kal of Kahuna, but if you were Kahal, then you wouldn't be able to marry Mamzerim. So then it shouldn't make a difference under 3 or over 3. So obviously Rabbi Shimon holds that Yimutarim love is Zebezeh. But I thought you told me that when you're over 3, when you told me when you're under 3, when you're permitted love kahuna, then you should be pasul love zebezeh. That was your barometer. You said whoever is pasul love kahuna is mutagas love zebezeh. If you hold like Rabbi Shimon, there's a difference between over 3 or under 3. Then under 3, what should be the halacha? You're permitted to marry kuna because not a zayit. Then you should be aser. That's the barometer you're giving. You should be aser, but it's not true. Shimon holds obviously, evidently, it's mutaris love zebezeh because he holds that it's not kahal. Varai, when she's over 3, she permitted mamzeres. So obviously, our Tana held from the fact that when you're 3 years old, let's say, that you're permitted to marry a mamzer. So obviously, he holds kagem is not called kal. So obviously, you can't say like Reb Shimon, because if you held like Reb Shimon, then how could we say under 3 it's going to be aser? I mean, that it's going to be mutter. That we're saying that it's going to be mutter lavi zebezeh. Well, why would that be? According to the Tanakh, there's no. If we're saying not like Shimon, there's no difference between over 3 or under 3. You're always forbidden to marry into kuna because we brought a pasuk in Yechezkel kim b'sulas mizer beis Yisrael. Kain always has to marry FFB. Always just can't marry someone that's from some other seed. So okay, so then it's always a giyaris is always psuli kuna, and therefore she fits into the categorical definition of kol sum lav b'kal kuna, which includes any giyaris, to say this halacha that even pchusim b'ashal Hashem yemechad, that it's going to be mutarim lavi zebezeh, she's allowed to marry mamzeres. But if you hold like Shimon, then it wouldn't make sense, because how you differentiating between what would you say regarding a 2-year-old girl? Well, then Rabbi Shimon would hold that she's permitted lavi zebezeh, but that doesn't fit into the criterion that you're saying. You're saying specifically that psulei kuhuna are allowed to marry lavi zebezeh. A 2-year-old years is kisherim to kuhuna, and yet evidently she would be mutter to marry mamzeres or mamzer. Right. It's really semantics here. We're getting into the words of you're giving, and that's really there's gonna be the whole amid over here. Like those are the words you're saying. That kol asugim lavi b'kal kuna is mutagim lavi zebezeh. So if you're kasher l'kuhuna, like you're a 2-year-old, then seemingly you should be usher to marry a mamzer or mamzeres. That's not true, because obviously, like you're saying, you obviously hold that they're not considered kahal, and that's why over 3 they're permitted. But then the under 3 shouldn't make a difference either. No, they're not considered kal because kal gem la ikr kal, because we learned that from a previous daf about. Yeah, that's something else. That's regarding kal kuna of his nus. That being a zayin doesn't make you forbidden to marry to the kill of Klal Yisrael. If you will, right, that's regarding kahuna. Then it's regarding, are you part of Klal Yisrael regarding marrying a mamzer? Because you're telling me that if you cannot marry into the kahuna, you're allowed to marry mamzeres, nasuni, shtiki, asif. You're allowed to marry all these people. How could you? If you're part of Klal Yisrael, I'll marry a mamzer. There's two different things that you have to have. But you can't, no, but mezana doesn't make you non-kahal of Klal Yisrael. Mezana would make you forbidden to a kohen. The kohen that says he's not allowed to marry a zayin, a chalala, he's not allowed to marry that. That's kahuna. Klal Yisrael is a different category of kahal. You're telling me that if you're forbidden to kahuna, it's punkt, as Rashi explains, like punkt, we're adding on a giyeres, because a giyeres actually is permitted in the kahal, but forbidden in kahal of kahuna. That's the one that we're adding on. And that's what we're saying, that they're permitted mamzerim. I permitted mamzerim. Obviously, you hold the lo ikri kahal. They don't have the issa marrying to the kahal, but they're not kahal themselves. So that's why you're allowed to marry mamzerim. But then there shouldn't be any difference between over 3 and under 3. That's why we're saying it can't be like a b'shimon. According to b'shimon, there would be, you're saying there's a difference regarding if they're kosher takuna, pas takuna over or under 3. That wouldn't make sense for what you're trying to say. That then you would be permitted mamzerim or forbidden mamzerim. Wouldn't make sense. You can't be half and half. You're either kahal of Klal Yisrael or you're not. So the Gemara now has the following question: says, really, the klalahu, is this like a general rule? Like you're saying, the chala sum lavi b'kal kuna, whoever is forbidden to marry into the keel of the kuna. Mutam lavi is permitted to marry a mamzer, which up until now we assumed only that there's only one case really that we're adding on, which is really giyeres. But it's not true. There's other cases. What are they? What do you do with almana, a widow, or grusha, or divorcee, or a chalala, a woman that was born from a forbidden marriage of kahuna, v'zayna, or a woman that became a prostitute? The sumlavi b'kal kahuna, they're forbidden to marry into the gil of kahuna. Yet v'sumlav bezeh, obviously not allowed to marry mamzer. Almana can't marry mamzer, but she's not married to the kahuna. A grusha can't marry to the kahuna. So how can you make such a general statement when you have these cases? Moreover, the Gemara wonders like as follows. The Gemara makes a diuk, an inference. From the fact that you tell me that the only one that's permitted to marry mamzeres is only those who are forbidden to kahanim, it sounds like hamutter. But if you're permitted to marry to the gavakun, it sounds like that and you're forbidden mamzeres. That's what your statement would seem to infer. I have a question by a ger. I have a convert. Shemutter b'kehenes. A ger is permitted to marry kehenes, like we said, because a kehenes is not forbidden to marry any psuli call. I mean, anyone like in that's psulim. And yet, he's permitted to marry mamzeres because since Kal Gerim is not called Kal, he's not forbidden to marry mamzeres. I thought you told me that they're inversely related. Kahuna and mamzeres are inversely related. But you see that it's not true. You could have someone that's permitted to marry Kahanis and still he's not forbidden mamzeres. So Elam Rav Nassim Hoishi, he gives a second shot. He says, you're right. Don't say Kol Hasurim, that you can ask me the question and say, oh, what do you do with Amalek and Gadol? And you can ask regarding the diuk of, what do you do with a ger? No. Hachim, this is what the teaching was saying in our Mishnah. Kol shekoin osalisa es bitoi. Any case that a kohen is forbidden to marry that man's daughter. What's being added onto this klal for those that are forbidden for a Jewish person? It's only including ger shenasa geyeres. A convert that married a female convert, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that he says in the Mishnah later on the Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph that a ger that marries a geyeres, his daughter is pasul for kahuna. That's what we're saying. Kol asurim lavoi bekal of kahuna, meaning that a kohen cannot marry his daughter. Who? Which case is that? That's adding on when the ger marries a geyeres and they have a child. Mutachim lavoi zebazeh. They're permitted to marry one the other. That's the case of a ger that's. What? What's the question? Oh, that we'll see later on Daf Ayin Zayin. But that's the case that a ger is permitted to marry a mamzer, and the mamzer can marry him. That's the case that we're adding on. That okay, That's kol asum lo b'kol mutam lo b'zeh b'zeh. That yeah, a ger can marry the mamzers because Rashi explains. Wait a second, why do we have to pick Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? Why couldn't you just say that it's a ger that married a regular Jewish woman, FFB? Says that you can't say because the one that teaches that a kohen is forbidden to marry such a daughter, even if the mother was not a geirus, that's Rabbi Yehuda, who says over there in the Mishnah of Ayin Zayin that the daughter of, if even just the father was a ger, the daughter is like the daughter of a chalal, but you can't say that opinion because from the fact that the sefer of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, there's three opinions on Mishnah. We had Tanakam, Rabbi Yehuda, and Belazar. So then, because Rabbi Yehuda says Eiser, obviously the Tanakam of a Mishnah, the Reish is not Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore we have to say who's the Tanakama like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and Rabbi Yehuda heard the Tanakama saying that Kal game is not called Kal, and therefore he held that a ger can marry a mamzeres, because we're talking about a ger that his daughter, we said you can't marry, so it's considered psuli kuna. We're saying that mutam lav zebazeh, meaning the ger can marry a mamzeres, ala sufi and the shtuki. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, says no, not true. A ger is not allowed to marry a mamzeres. But that was the how you're supposed to define. That's the second interpretation of Gemara, how to define the halacha of our Mishnah. It says Mavaklolo, is that really klal also? The chol shekoin asli says bitoy. Again, we had to say it this way because we had the difficulties of amana, grusha, chalala. We didn't know how to say it, so we said we're saying in a different wording that we don't have that case. It's not just whoever is forbidden to marry into kuna. Because they have amana and grusha. What do you do with them? Say no. In the case that you can't marry the daughter, that's specific to Marager. Said both. So the Gemara doesn't like the sentence either. Is that true that it's a general rule? The chol shekoin asli says bitoy. Whenever the kohen is forbidden to marry his daughter, that mutam love is ebezeh, that individual, that his daughter, the kohen can't marry, he's allowed to marry mamzerim and asufi and shtuki, whatever. What do you do with the following case? A kohen who was born where his mother was a divorcee who married his father a kohen, he's a chol. When he marries a bas Yisrael, a regular Jewish woman, the kohen asali is a bitay. A kohen cannot marry his daughter because his daughter, since the father is a chol, the daughter is a chalala. And yet, with that daughter is a regular Jewish girl, she can't marry a mamzer. But based on the wording that you said, should be mutarim of zebazeh. You thought you're only adding on this ger to marry that his daughter's forbidden to goodness, so he can't marry. He could marry a mamzeres. But what do you say with the chol? The chol can't marry the father, who his daughter is forbidden to kahuna. He can't marry a mamzeres. But you told me whoever's daughter can't marry Kain, that guy is mutar in the shtuke. It's not true. He's a chal. His daughter's forbidden to kahuna. It's not just the case that you're adding on with ger. Ger could marry mamzeres maybe, but a chal can't marry mamzeres. So your statement's not true. So the Gemara Loikesh not difficult. We're talking about Rabbi Shloimy ben Yehuda. He holds that to the Tana of our Mishnah, as we'll see later on, the Vayin Zayin, B'nois Yisrael are mikveh tahara l'chalal. The Jewish women are purifying mikveh for someone that's a chal. So that actually wouldn't be a case of kol she kohen asalis bitay, because the kohen actually is not forbidden to marry the daughter of a chal. If his wife is a regular Jewish woman, the daughter is not a chalala.
But then it goes one generation. After that generation, she can marry
What are you talking about, chal?
a bas. Well, she can marry a Yisrael, and those children.
No, so that depends. That we'll see. But if we consider the daughter of a chal, that we'll see on the Vayin Zayin. The daughter of a chal is considered a chalala or not. But the Shloimy ben Yehuda holds that the daughter of a chal is not a chalala. So it's not a case of asking from, that's a case of that the kohen can't marry his daughter, and yet the father is forbidden. It's not true because that's not such a case. The daughter actually is a regular. She could marry into the kuna. Says Gemara, wait, but I have still another question. What do you do about rechol shenasa chalala? Okay, let's say the mother is not a regular Yisraelis. She's a chalala. A chal found his motzim in minoi. He found another chalala. The kohen asli says bita. Their kohen cannot marry his daughter, but and still the father of the chal cannot marry mamzeres. That goes against the klal that you're saying. Pursue another question again from the diuk. It sounds like what you're saying. Okay, but ha mutter. But if the daughter would be permitted to marry a kohen, sounds like then asur, then the father would be forbidden in those asurim, in those mamzerim, and then he wouldn't be able to marry them. I have the following case: a convert that married a regular Jewish woman. But kohen mutar li sabitay, so a kohen's allowed to marry that daughter, because she's a regular, that daughter is FFB. Umatarim love is ebezeh. And yet the father is permitted to marry mamzerim because you told me kal gerim lo yikru kal. So the father's allowed, but that goes against your rule. Your rule was, seemingly, black and white, that whoever is the daughter forbidden to kuna, that father could marry the psulim. Sounds like, but those that the daughter could marry kuna, the father cannot marry psulim. It's not true. This case, that the ger that married Bas Yisrael, the kohen would be permitted in the daughter, and he would still be permitted to marry a mamzeres. So the Gemara, option number 3. A different shot. Very different shot. We're going a different direction now. Hach in our Mishnah is mamzer ma'achaisei. Tomad, if let's say there was someone that was a mamzer because someone married his sister. Now to marry his sister is a chi of krisis. And a mamzer me'eshes ish. Someone could be a mamzer because someone had relations with a married woman, which is chi of Mrs. Bezdin. Different type of punishment. That's a difference between the Tanakam and Yehuda, and they're not disagreeing like we thought in the past two pshatim regarding a ger. What's the machlekes? So it says the Gemara like this: Tanakam held afil mamzer machlekes and nam have a mamzer. Even if someone's a mamzer from having married his sister, the child is going to be a mamzer because there's a mamzer from chiv krisis. And what the Tanakam was saying was, all those that are born from an Isser Erva are mamzerim, and they're permitted to marry each other, meaning the children of Chiva Krisis can marry the children of Chiv Mrs. Bezin like Eishes Ish, because they're all mamzerim. That's what he's saying. Rabbi Yehuda, he said that you're not allowed to have the children of a Chiva Krisis, let's say they were born from a man with a sister, to marry a mamzer from the children of, let's say, a man with a relation with an Eishes Ish or Chiv Mrs. Bezin. Because Savar, he held no, the child born from a married woman is a mamzer. A child born from incest from the sister is not a mamzer, as the Gemara explains in Yavamas of Memtesam. He holds mamzers only from Chiv Mrs. Bezdin. That is their machlokes ka'asurim lavi b'kal, meaning whoever is forbidden because you're considering them as a mamzer, they're permitted to marry into each other. So he's saying no, it's not true. That's not a categorical thing, says Rabbi Yehuda, because he holds that the case that you're describing is actually going to be forbidden for the Chiv Mrs. Krisis to marry the Chiv Mrs. Bezin. Says Gemara, wait, my Kamash Malan. So what's this Chiddush already of our Mishnah then? Because we found another machlokes of other Tanoim on the same point. Why would Rabbi Yehuda Nasi have to say the same machlokes in two different Mishnayos? You should have said over there by Rabbi Yeshua, as we're going to quote right now in Yavamas, that Rabbi Yehuda says like him. Because Tanini, we learned in the Masechet Zirabamas that actually says the exact machlokes. Why would you say it a second time? The Mishnah says over there, a zehu mamzer. Who's a mamzer? So the first opinion we didn't even mention over here. He says kol shu b'lo yaveh. Rabbi Kiva says anything that says you're not allowed to be together, even just a negative prohibition. Kiva says the child's going to be a mamzer. That's opinion number one. Okay, we're not talking about Rabbi Kiva. Next opinion, Shimon Timni. I mean, he says kol shachayav and alav. Anyone that you would be liable for that intercourse, for that relationship, you'd be liable for kares b'dei shemayim. That child's going to be a mamzer. And the Mishnah says of the Malacha Kidvar, the Malacha is like him. Shuam says no. Anyone that you're liable for Mrs. Bezin, Mechiba Kris is not. And the Gemara explains over the whole reason Yavamas over there. But we see the last two opinions are exactly this machlokes he's trying to say. Is a mamzer of Mechiv Mrs. Bezin or even Mechiba Krisis? That would obviously depend. Could they marry each other? Because one's either both a mamzer, or only one is and one not. So we already said this already over there. Why make a whole other mission out of it? So the Gemara falls over that too, and then we're on to interpretation number 4. The Mishnah. Ela Amar Rabbi says a whole different shot. The difference between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda is a ger from the people of Ammon and Moav. This is what the Tanakam was saying. Whoever cannot marry into the kila, who's that? Who can't marry into the kila? Now there are certain types, but he was talking about specific types. They cannot marry in; they're forbidden forever. Ammon and Moav, those gerim are forever forbidden to marry in 10 generations, 100 generations. Oh, mutarin love is ebezeh. They're permitted to marry, meaning mamzerim, even though they're not illegitimate, but the fact that they're gerim from Ammon and Moav, and mamzerim are permitted to marry them. Says him up. Wait, if that's the case, the Tanakh was talking about, I might be the Isa. Why are you to say it's forbidden? But for sure they're not called kahal. They're never permitted to ever marry into the kila. So why would the people of Amon Moav not be permitted to marry Mamzer? Says the Gemara, you're right. Hachi Kamar. In other words, there's no machlokes. It's not a Tana Kamar Yehuda. It's actually all one Tana. Even though Rabbi Yehuda, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda was coming in, as we mentioned all the way in the beginning of the daf. The only place we ever found Rabbi Yehuda being mentioned in the halachas of Yuchasin was one halacha. He holds a ger cannot marry mamzeres, which is a chiddush, because a ger is not considered kahal, or maybe it is. But that's what he's saying. He's saying no, a ger cannot marry mamzeres. It is considered kahal. So that's what he's saying. Even though he holds that a ger cannot marry mamzeres, Hanamila was talking about ger deror of bakal. That's the only ger that's fit to marry into the keel of the Jewish people, which a ger is allowed to marry into the Jewish people. So then he holds, okay, so that's forbidden in mamzer because you're even called kahal, and you cannot marry mamzeres. But if you're a ger from the people of Amon Moav, they ain't ruin love bakal, because the Torah says explicitly you're never allowed to marry into the Jewish people ever. Lois, that's really a chiddush, because we find him saying that gerim are considered as kahal. So you would think to say that all gerim, as we find by all gerim are forbidden mamzeres, you would think they would include the gerim of Amon Moav, even though they're not permitted to marry into the kill of Jewish people. That's the chiddush that Loi no that was saying that he's saying that actually that he holds that you're going to be forbidden to marry. You would have actually thought to say that Amon Moav could marry mamzerim. We're saying no. It's not only those that are permitted love bakal. Even if you're forbidden to come into the kal, you're still going to be forbidden to marry a mamzer because you are considered kal. So that's the chiddush of Amon Moav. They can only marry their kind because they cannot marry the kil and they cannot marry neither the pesuli kal of let's mamzer anything to any time. Hosting us.